Hi, everyone. Welcome to Around the Ladder. I'm Erika Steinberg, and this is the podcast where we talk about career paths that don't follow the usual script. We've all heard about climbing the corporate ladder, but careers will zigzag, they'll stall, they'll take unexpected turns. So if your journey hasn't been a straight climb up, you're in the right place. I love the idea of going around the ladder and finding a path that fits who you really are. So, in this show, I get to talk with people who have taken unconventional routes, either by choice or by chance, and they found success on their own terms. So, today, my guest is Meg Pritchard, and I'm very happy to have her on here. After a turn as a litigator, a legal writer and editor, and then in house as a marketer with an AmLaw 100 firm, Meg launched Create Communications in 2011, providing outsourced content for law firms. While she started as a one-woman business, Meg has grown Create Communications into a small but very mighty consultancy that works with AmLaw 100 and 200 firms. Those are the big ones, for those of you who don't know, to develop branded content and thought leadership for their marketing and business development. She is zealous about all things marketing and content, and we've had some fantastic conversations, both face to face, on LinkedIn, whatever, about this. She talks really fast. She doesn't really have an inside voice. She swears more than occasionally, but we are going to try to keep it PG today. She's also an amateur rock climber. She's a dog and wine lover, wife of a lawyer, so you know that she's really committed to this whole legal thing, and a mother of four now mostly grown kids. In her scant spare time, Meg also knits very precisely. She cooks very messily, and she gardens very haphazardly. So don't get in her way in the garden. So Meg, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad we've had so many conversations. So I figured it was time for us to record one and share it with the world. Right?
Well, thank you for having me. I am both excited and terrified at the same time because I feel like podcasts are I mean they're a thing, right? So it's not something I would ever attempt. So I'm a little bit in awe of the fact that you are choosing this medium. So
Well, you know what? It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while. And this has been the year, although I've been practicing this for a while, but this has been the year where I've really been letting go of the need to be perfect and for things to be perfect. And it's been very freeing for me. So give it a try. I think that you will like it also.
I'm gonna have to hear more about that. Like
Just pretend it's cooking, you don't measure, you don't have to measure. You're not
I like
baking, you're
that.
cooking.
I can do that. I can try.
Yeah, of course you can. So let's talk about your career because you really have been, I've been fascinated, of course. I started my podcast talking with people from all walks of life who have had unconventional careers or have taken, I don't want to say unconventional, but like people who have just followed their own path. Rather than what was expected. And I have found as time goes on that I am really drawn to people in the legal profession or who are somehow, related to the legal profession because the conventional wisdom is that you're going to go to law school, you're going to land a job with a big firm, and you're going to be on the partner track. So you started your career in litigation really on that track, and now you lead an amazing content consultancy for law firms. So you're still using your law degree, of course. Did you ever imagine that this is where you would end up? Like what led you, I guess, to take that first step off the law firm path, off that partner track?
Well, I actually think that unconventional is a pretty good word. I mean, I know that and it sort of suggests that there is only one way to do it, and I think these days that's not necessarily true. But I
Yeah.
think that most of my career choices have been unconventional by industry standards, right?
Hmm.
So you're right. I mean, I started as a litigation associate in a boutique firm, which was not actually my original plan. My original plan was big law.
Yeah.
But somewhere between graduating from law school and while I was studying for the bar, I was not one of those law students who could just take a whole summer off and do that. I needed to support myself. As I had through law school, I was a night student, another unconventional choice.
Yeah.
And so I started working for this little small but mighty boutique litigation firm. And at the end of the summer, they said, "We love you. We wish you could stay." And I said, I like you guys too. I wish I could too. And they're like, well, so I made the choice actually to say thank you, no thank you to the big law firm who shall remain nameless that I was supposed to go to in Washington, D.C. And I stayed in Philadelphia. And so that was my first unconventional
Yeah.
choice, right? My second unconventional choice was to, with a friend, start the Philly office of a Chicago firm, which doesn't exist anymore. So unconventional choice number two was, again, not on the path that we're all sort of accustomed to, but still sort of going in the same direction. When I stepped completely off the law firm path, it didn't happen like, oh, here's the path, and now I'm going to jump off.
And I'm jumping off the path.
Right. I mean, I think all of those choices that I've made, all of my choices have been sort of a combination of circumstance, opportunity, and being true to myself, right? So I'm an associate. I'm working in this small office, and I get pregnant. I'm going to have a baby, and she came early. She was premature. That was like I was off the path. And then I went back to practice with that same firm part-time, which was an unconventional choice back then in 19, no, 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 right. Okay, we're not talking about how long ago that was. And it was challenging, right? But the firm was willing to undertake it, and I was a litigator, which of course had its own challenges in trying to do that. But then baby two, a few years later, turned out to be babies two and three, my son and my daughter. Also, early, also 3 months of bed rest, and boom, I was off the path altogether, right? Um, I knew I wasn't going back anytime soon, and then I decided to stay home while they were young, and then 7 years later, another daughter, a divorce. I needed to go back to work, and I wasn't going back to trying to be a litigator. So I think that was kind of the defining, now I'm really off the path decision
Yeah.
was I'm not going back to the law firm world, at least as a lawyer.
So, I mean, there's so much uncertainty in that. Like, how did you push through that time? How did you? I get anxiety even just thinking about it, or maybe it's just the anxiety thinking about having four kids, but because I
There's that
stopped at
too.
two.
That too. Um, well, like I need a t-shirt that says this. My kids, we talk about this all the time. Panic is an excellent motivator, right? Four young kids. I'm divorced. I know I need to go back to work. So I sort of grabbed what I knew I had, which was my JD and writing ability because I'd been doing some freelance writing here and there. And I decided to, try my hand at exclusively focusing on sort of legal publications. And I wrote something for American Lawyer Media's Legal Intelligencer. They
Mhm.
took it on a freelance basis. And then the editor-in-chief called and he said, hey, we'd like to interview you for a job. Okay, well, there it is, like opportunity, circumstance, and okay, that's what I needed next. And one of the other things I say to my kids all the time is I've never been fully qualified for any job I've actually taken because I don't think that's how you should do your career, right? I think
Yeah.
I was talking to my daughter yesterday. She had an interview today for a job, and she's like, I don't know, I'm not sure I completely fit the qualifications. I said, no one does. Women worry about it more. And when you make a career move, you need to know what you don't know where to get what you don't know or learn what you don't know, and then go from there. And as I said, if you have to support yourself, if you have four kids, if you need to move on to the next stage of your life, that motivates you too.
Yeah, yeah. I never thought about that, that there's nobody's really fully qualified because then there's no opportunity for growth. Or there's maybe there is as you're in a job, as you're in a position, there should be opportunity for growth and to learn more and do more. It reminds me of one of the things that you say. I know that I had to ask you what this meant because I know nothing about rock climbing in any way, shape, or form. But I know that you said, there's more than one way to get to the top. And so like that, it reminds me of that. So like How has that shown up in your career choices for you?
Again, like, there's that one path that we're sort of all, we come out of law school and you're going to the big law firm, or you're going to be a litigator, or you're going to be a transactional lawyer, or you're going to go into government, or so there are those set paths, and I think that you get determine what success looks like, for yourself.
Hmm.
But that again, that's kind of unconventional, right? And I say that, that comes sort of out of rock climbing in the sense that the goal is to get to the top. Um, uh, the goal is to, you start at the you start at the ground and you got to get to the top somehow, but there's more than one way to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm short and old, right? My daughter is even shorter and tiny. My climbing partner is nearly 6 feet tall and 15 years younger than I am, right? So when we're looking at a route,
Hmm.
um, she's going to do it differently than I am. There are some moves that make sense and other moves that don't, but for you, for who you are, I, her legs are almost as long as mine are. My climbing partner, Erin, is going to say, I'm going to lift my leg and I'm going to get to here. I'm never going to be able to do that. So figure out like what works for you and like sort of what moves you can make
Yeah.
both here in front of you on the wall or on the rock face, and also like you have to think ahead to like what's the next one you're going to do, right? So when I started this business, it was again opportunity, situation, opportunity, what I needed to do.
Yeah.
I was trying to decide whether I wanted to stay in the law firm world because by then I was there, or go out on my own. And opportunity, life gave me a kick in the, you know what? I lost my job. So suddenly I had a decision, it was made, and then I needed to figure out to, where to go from there.
Yeah.
And in the 11 years I've been doing it, I've evolved and evolved and evolved to figure out the right clients, the right mix of things, um, the right way the business looks, right? And
Yeah.
and I think that's how it shows up now is I've structured my business a particular way. I've focused on a certain type of client and how I work with clients. And to me that's the top, right? I now have a core group of clients, a core group of team members doing what I want to be doing. But it doesn't look like other content agencies. It doesn't look like other, bigger legal marketing agencies
Hmm.
is what it is,
Yeah.
right?
No, but it looks like what you wanted and what works for you.
That's right.
And if it works for you, then it works for your clients.
I think I said in a LinkedIn response to somebody's post today, I don't think it was yours. I think I said, I am not everybody's cup of tea. I'm not everybody's glass of wine, or however you want to put it. Um, Again, no inside voice. I talk really fast. I will throw curse words. I will challenge my clients to not do things the typical way. That's how everybody does it. I know that's how everybody does it, but the point is distinguishing yourself in the
Yeah.
marketplace. We're not going to do it that way. We're going to think over here. And so for those clients that are willing to jump on in, bring me in, and expose their lawyers to me and me to their lawyers to work together, it works really well. But again, not every law firm wants to do that.
Yeah. I remember years ago now. I think I was probably 2 or 3 years in with my business, and somebody said to me, I think it was a networking call, and somebody said, "How do you convince law firms to work with you?" And I said, "I don't convince them. If they have a need and I can provide a solution and everything aligns, we get along, the budget is there, the time is there, the commitment is there, then it's going to work out. And if it doesn't, then, I say, Gei gesund, and I'm here for you if you need me. And that's fine.
Right.
But I'm not here to convince somebody. I'm here to help.
Every single one of my clients, from the beginning has been because somebody knows me
Hmm.
and they bring me in. Um, to work with a group of lawyers or on a special project. So it's been again an unconventional path, right? I still have as a great client, the first client I ever got 14 years ago. And it started as they needed a freelance writer and they wanted someone to work, I forget how many hours a week on one project. And then, and that's because somebody that I went to college with, I connected with on a networking, an alma mater networking site, right? And she's like, okay, well, you're a known quantity in the sense that we went to college together. You know, she brought me in. And I've grown the relationship with that client to the point now where I'm doing, most of their branded content and their their chambers and Legal 500 and all that submission stuff and presentation materials and all sorts of things for them. And that's grown over 14 years, but I've had that client since the
Day
beginning.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're talking about, just now you were talking about stuff like the chamber submissions and also and other projects for this client. So when I think about what you do, there's strategic thinking, there's creative execution, and it seems like it's, left brain and right brain. So how do you balance that? Like, how do you figure that out? And also you're working with law firms, which are really a mind-driven place, a mind-driven organization. But in order to distinguish yourself, you have to, go beyond that too.
Am I allowed to say drugs? Because that is
Sure.
actually okay. Because that is actually a facetious but a true answer. So, I mean, I do have ADHD. I was diagnosed as an adult, sort of very late in life because, um, so I'm 61. So when I was in school, um, girls didn't have
Yeah.
ADHD, and we weren't diagnosed with it, and so. And I think it's become less of a thing that people are afraid to admit, but still there's a stigma attached to some of that, and I feel like that needs to change. But and I'm only half joking because the right medication makes it so much easier
Yeah.
to focus, do what you need to do. It's game changing. All those things that I was doing that were challenging, but I was doing them, are now less difficult, right? So it's like the noise goes away. It's fantastic. So that's my little plug for if you need it, you should get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Um, yeah, but
My
it's
daughter is a my daughter is a sophomore in high school now, and she was diagnosed with ADHD in her probably in the middle of her freshman year, and it took a while because it shows up so differently in girls.
yeah.
And she was telling us things. She was kept telling us the same thing over and over again. And it took finally like listening differently, talking to her therapist, going to a doctor, going to a psychiatrist, and talking to the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, "Yeah, this shows up very differently in girls." So
It it
I'm glad that I'm
it
glad that we caught it
yeah.
now, even in her teenage years.
It shows up very differently across genders and across people, right?
Yeah.
So my children were the ones who are like, some of us have this, and so perhaps you do too. You might want to consider this. So it
So
actually
they were so okay.
worked its way
Those
back
kids.
out.
Did you send them to their room? I'd be like, go to your room.
No, no, no. But what you were just talking about is true, right? People have different skill sets, and so I have a very good colleague. Without him, I couldn't do a lot of the work that I do. And I don't think it's telling tales out of school to say that he also has ADHD, but his manifests differently, right? So his is very detail oriented. Mine is not,
Yeah.
right? So that's one of the other things that I've learned is that I have learned to differentiate between what I love to do and what I don't, what I'm good at and what I just have the ability to do, but it's like pulling teeth. Like I don't
Mhm.
want to do it. And just things that are not in my skill set. if I had to, I would, but I really don't want to do that. So, you know, I had to learn that there's no like shame in not wanting to do the things I loathe, and then finding people who have non-overlapping skills who can do that with me,
Yeah.
right? So I'm a big believer in surrounding yourself with people who can do the things, who can complement you, and leaning on them to do that,
Yeah.
right? So learning from them, leaning on them. And so I've built a team that I can put together for specific projects or for long-term engagements. And if I need someone who's, very good at line editing, I know who to tap into. If you need someone who can conceptualize from 30,000 feet, um, that's somebody else. And we can all work together to get what needs to be done. And then there's my amazing operations manager who does all of the business related things that like I never want to see again. And I would not have an actual going concern as a business if I did not have her,
Yeah.
because invoices would be late, hours wouldn't be input. Like it's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So thank goodness for team members, right?
For sure. And also it sounds like um you've taken on a leadership role, and so as you as the leader, you have defined all of these areas. And it has to start with you doing it as the leader and the founder of your business. So it really, thank goodness that you saw that as well. Um, and I want to switch gears and talk about leadership
Mhm.
because you have worked with a lot of law firms. And so in your work with law firms, what have, and I would imagine that you've worked with a lot of law firm leaders. So what have you learned about leadership from all of this time working with law firms that create communications?
That is a great question, and I think it's
And timed very intentionally with what's going on today.
I know it is it's a very topical question for what's going on in the legal industry today. And I know that you're in the legal industry, but your podcast it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
But it's national news now.
Yeah.
So I think people are seeing that. And law firms have a reputation for being demanding, autocratic, sometimes thankless places to work. And I've certainly had some bosses in my time in the law firm world, who've lived up to that reputation. Not so much now because I sort of work at the intersection of marketing and legal. And so I get to work across administrative departments, technology, the legal practices. So, I see a broader range of people, and I also think that the law firm culture has started to shift a little bit. Um, and back in the day when I was an associate, certainly that was a little bit what you expected when you went into a law firm. And, those bosses did live up to that. And I will also say, from my own leadership perspective, um, there have been times when, because that was the example, I emulated that.
Hmm.
And I sort of regret that I sometimes took my cues from those bosses, thinking, okay, these are successful people.
Hmm.
Um, and they've gotten where they've gotten, and they act this way. So that may be okay, or that should be okay, or that's what's expected. And I had some great mentors who basically, helped me see that that wasn't necessarily the way to lead,
Yeah.
right? Thankfully. Um, and, I've worked with CMOs and firm leadership across a really big spectrum of leadership styles, I think. I think law firm leadership and, law firms are businesses, and I think more and more both lawyers in leadership and the other strategic pieces of the law firm leadership, CMOs,
Yeah.
CFOs, like they're starting to realize that they have to lead from a business perspective more than law as a profession perspective too.
Yep.
We're seeing a lot of that. So I think those successful leaders have a strategic vision. They can see, in bigger, broader strokes. They know how to surround themselves with people who can fill in the blanks, you know, do have non-overlapping skills, do the things that can help them uh, take that vision and translate it into tactical,
Yes. Something
next steps.
actionable.
Right, which is something that you spend a lot of time doing, I know.
Hmm.
So there's that. And then I think another part of that is being able to communicate all of that to the people that are on the ground, right? Your entire law firm culture in a way that, brings them in at all levels into that shared vision. And I think that I really do believe that I think that coming back to where we are today and what's going on in the legal world in the public eye, I think that's the really important piece of it, is to be able to sort of lead with transparency,
Hmm.
and also a firm grasp on, your ethical and your, ethics, integrity, honesty, all of that. That's the essence of the legal profession. That has to be the essence of the business built around that legal profession. That has to be translated to clients because right this minute, in the chaos that we're seeing, clients are clamoring for that kind of
Yeah.
leadership from their firms. And that has to be translated or communicated well to everybody in your firm at all levels, that we are still operating with ethics and integrity and honesty and transparency because, you know, this is what we believe.
Yeah.
So I think those are essential for law firm leadership. And I think you'll see the fallout coming for those leaders. You're already seeing it for those
Yeah.
leaders in firms that are not leading with transparency and leading from a place of integrity and ethics.
Yeah, I mean, you could have like we could do have a whole other episode talking about internal communications.
Mhm.
And actually, a woman who I work with, Alejandra Ramirez, has built an entire business on working with businesses on their internal communications because it is so important. Um, let's talk about external though, and talk about content because I do want to talk more about what you do. Um, I'm a process person, so let's talk about the process behind creating content. Why does structure matter so much when you're building a strong content program?
We're going to talk process. Well,
I know, yeah. So you're one of the few people in the world who will be like, "Oh, yay."
great process. Which I think is different than project management, right? So those
Yes.
are two very different skill sets, and you need both, right? Um, I mean, the simple answer is lawyers, right? Lawyers have to be focused on the job that they do for their clients, right? That is their number one priority. Being their clients' advocate, representative, counsel, all of that, and they have to be focused on that. And to get content out there in a way that is effective for, both larger brand marketing for law firms and more targeted business development. So driving your business development, whether it's, one lawyer, a group of lawyers, the whole firm, it has to be consistent. It has to be fresh. It has to be relevant. It has to be pushed out across, you know, a bunch of different channels, the ones that you own, the ones that the firm owns, the ones that they don't, whatever opportunity you get to get to your target audience, right?
Mhm.
It has to be done strategically. And lawyers they don't have the time for that. And there are a lot of lawyers who have uh, the appetite for doing it, but they also know that they can't they may not be able to do it as consistently or as strategically as they need to, because again, it cannot be the first thing. So developing that kind of content takes time. Um, Lawyers are busy, marketing departments are also a little overburdened sometimes, as you know,
Yeah.
which is how, which is where you sometimes are able to place team members to help them with these projects. And the content has to be continuously properly aligned. So that takes more than just a couple of lawyers writing newsletters and alerts. So what ends up happening is that you get content programs that are fabulous ideas. And there's a great audience for them. It's a blog, it's a newsletter, it's a podcast, it's a campaign, right? That's designed for a particular purpose, but it loses momentum because people get busy.
Yeah.
And having a strong content process in place that is marketing led, right, and covers everything from iteration to development to approvals, conflicts, all of that, making sure that there's no, ethical or conflict problems in putting it out, to getting it out there, and then what happens next with that content, right? Like, because you don't just drop a piece of content and ta-da! It doesn't really happen that way. So clear responsibilities at each step, appropriate resources, who's doing what, and do you have backup and overlap at each step? It prevents, content programs from petering out. It prevents great content from getting stuck places,
Hmm.
somebody's inbox, in somebody's head, in somebody's drawer, right? Somebody's half finished, whatever. It keeps the content flowing in a way because people know what's expected of them, what the next step is, and eventually how the content's going to be used. It's not foolproof. You still have what I call content black holes because, mar marketing departments are, under-resourced and over-committed, and lawyers are too, and things happen. But a really good content process, I think, is also iterative, but you stand that up and at least you have something to lean on when the going gets tough, right?
Yeah.
So you can keep your content flowing,
Yeah.
um, in the face of challenges.
Yeah, and I mean, your company is all about helping law firms use content to stand out.
Mhm.
So you just talked about a number of places where things can go off the rails. Are there common mistakes that you're still seeing law firms make when it comes to doing this? Something that, that they should really be on the lookout for?
Well, I think that gets to the point of the challenges that law firms are facing, like in the marketplace at the moment, right? The whole public glare aside, legal services is a pretty undifferentiated market, right?
Yeah.
By which I mean that many firms offer a similar set of services. Um, you might have industry or market sector differentiation, you might have geographical or regional differentiation, but legal services is largely undifferentiated, right? So what that means is most buyers of legal services, if they're trying to make a decision, right, they can't tell one law firm from another. And what law firms need to do is find a way to help buyers differentiate, choose them rather than the law firm down the street, or sometimes the law firm next door, or two
Yeah.
floors down, depending on where you are, right? I mean, even for the biggest of firms, I think I read not that long ago that brand recognition hovers at like 3% at best, which means that like the vast number of firms are not top of mind uh, for any buyer of legal services, no matter like what type of service you need, right? So they have to differentiate themselves on more than just, the name that's over the door,
Yeah.
right? They have to differentiate themselves on the services that they provide, who they work with in terms of what types of clients and what they can do for those clients. And they have to use, as I think I said before, every available channel that they can
Hmm.
that they can find, not just their website, right? I mean, your website is one place, serves a bunch of different purposes, but a lot of buyers of legal services are doing a lot of online vetting of law firms these days, a lot of digital vetting, long before they ever reach out.
Yeah.
And they're looking for that content. They're looking for the proof points for decision making to be able to really trust this is the group of lawyers that's going to solve or help me solve sometimes like the most difficult or devastating problems, right, for them. So one website isn't going to do it, but your website, is an integral piece of all of that. But
Yeah.
so firms need to dig in, right, and get clear on how they do that for clients, what their proof points are, um, for the work that they know they can do, right? And then they have to message that in a way that meets what clients are looking to see and hear. And they have to do it where those potential clients are.
Yeah.
Not just not just come to my website and look, but
Yeah.
everywhere. Yep, that's right. And so that's where you get um, the power of branded content and thought leadership. So, and again, not just one group of lawyers writing an article or a couple of alerts, like really targeted,
Consistent. Yes.
really strategic, like again, like as much as I need a t-shirt that says panic is a great motivator, I need a t-shirt that says no more random acts of marketing, right? You know,
I've been saying that for decades.
I know you have. I know. We're gonna get those
I
t-shirts.
know.
We're definitely. But like seriously considering where your business development opportunities are, what you want to highlight. Like every law firm says they're responsive and they have great client service or whatever, but again, undifferentiated.
Yeah.
But if you, for example, have a group of lawyers who are focused in a particular area, helping a certain group of clients with a certain set of problems, you build content around that
Yeah.
and you deploy it in a fully like everywhere strategic way rather than, you know, putting a service description up on your website and
Yes.
just
And waiting.
right? And then you squeeze literally every drop of business development use out of that content.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that I think law firms and lawyers tend to forget is it's not one and done, right? So social media, turn it into a video, make it little clips, do a sound bite, and then make sure everything else supports that. Are your bios up to date? Are your LinkedIn profiles up to date? Is your website up to date? Like, what clients can you personalize and send this piece of content to? Like, it's more than just,
Yeah.
here's an article that I wrote.
Yeah. Yeah. And let me send it out and, see what happens.
Yeah.
So, okay. So speaking of content and
Mhm.
speaking of newsletters, you know how hard it is. You know how hard it is to maintain something like this. And yet you started a newsletter. So, which I love, you named it the sharp end. And I had no idea what that meant until you explained to me that it was a rock climbing reference.
Mhm.
So, what on earth made you want to do this? Was it a moment of
Erica,
insanity?
like it is a little bit of insanity, right? Like if there were a time to insert a swear word, it would be right here, right? Like I don't know. I think if I'm being honest as a content strategist, I do know the power of content for marketing and business development, but um, but that's actually not where this started, right? It sort of started. It started because I do a lot of writing, right? I love writing.
Yeah.
I have a couple of columns that I do regularly, and I've been doing them for, for one organization a couple of years. For the Legal Intelligencer, I mean, I left there as an editor, and then not that long after started doing a marketing column for them. So it's been more than a decade.
Yeah.
So I had all of this content, and I keep generating more. And then I have a blog on my website. So it sort of sat there for a little while, and I do social media. But I knew that I wanted to do something more with it, but I wasn't sure what.
Hmm.
And then I was noodling around some actual business development and networking ideas with a colleague of mine. And she said, people love to be asked for advice. Like you can do all the outreach in the world, but that's just outreach. But people love to be asked for advice
Yeah.
because the people that you're wanting to work with are also incredibly savvy, smart people that, in their own right, have a lot to say about their particular area, legal marketing, business development, strategy, all of that. And the light bulb went on up here, and I went, oh, okay, starting to see something here. But I am not crazy enough to do a podcast. It's not
Thank you.
anything I would ever, no, I would never want to do it. I told you I was nervous. Like doing this, just it's making me nervous, right? And then it took me another 6 months to like noodle it around
Yeah.
and, you know, panic a little bit about it and think that no one would want to like be featured in it. And but then, I sort of got a little bit more comfortable with it. And like I have a great lead writer. Her name is Samantha Drake. She does a lot of our original content for clients, and she has the most unbelievable interview skills, and also one of her particular talents is Q&A style profiles. So we started to play with that a little bit. And then my brand stewardship team at the Humanize Collective, I think you probably know
Oh, yeah,
Charlie.
yeah, Charlie. Yep.
Yep. She started talking to me about, okay, so what's this going to be and how's it going to look? And the more support I got for that, the better it started to feel. Um, and, the sharp end actually means when you're climbing, um, there are a whole bunch of different kinds of climbing, but the person on the sharp end of the rope is the one who's going up first. And they don't have the safety, they have some safety gear, but they don't have uh, a direct path. And there's no safety gear ahead of them. They either have to place it or find it.
Hmm.
And they are the ones at the sharp end of they're the leaders, right?
Yeah.
So my idea was, okay, I want to talk to people who are at the sharp end of legal marketing's leading voices, and I want to hear what they have to say.
Hmm.
And you know me enough to know that like I don't take things at face value. So I'm gonna poke and I'm gonna prod, and then I did that thing that I always do to myself, which is okay. I know a lot of people, but I'm going to go out on a limb and ask someone that I barely know to be the first person. Somebody I heard speak at a conference, and I was, I was fangirling by the end of what he was saying.
That was Phil, right?
So,
I,
and yeah,
great choice.
yeah, and I reached out to Phil right after that conference without even thinking about this. And we were supposed to get together and have a chat. And then I got busy and he got busy, and then things changed for him. And then when we finally got back together to talk, he had started his own
Hmm.
consultancy. So we talked about that. We talked about all of the innovative things that he's been doing and he's been espousing in legal marketing. And I went, so Phil, how would you feel about doing this with me? And he's like, I can do that. Ta-da.
Yeah.
Like after doing that one, which felt like a big ask from somebody that I barely knew, then I felt like, okay, there's this I can do.
Yeah.
I can keep it going because other people I ask, um, we've done it once, they can see it, they know what to expect. Some of these folks are people I've worked with for years that, are willing to help me out anyway. So that was good. And then like I built a team to help me do it. So process and
Yeah.
teamwork, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell you with the podcast, same thing.
And don't you still sometimes feel and if you say no, I'm going to throw myself out the window because I'm hoping you say yes. Don't you feel like there are still days when you are ready to put an episode out or you and I'm ready to put an issue out and I'm like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, like this is scary.
Yeah.
Panic is
Absolutely.
Panic is a great motivator because now that it's out there, if it falls off the radar, if I stop doing it, I have just committed the cardinal sin of content marketing. I have
Yes.
done what I counsel everyone else not to do, which is
Yeah.
start something and then let it
Let
drop.
it go. Yeah. My mother always said, has been telling me for years during my career, you should always be a little bit nervous. It
Mhm.
keeps you on your toes. If you're not a little bit nervous, then take a look at why.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
I have one more question for you. For today, obviously, I'll have a zillion questions for you, during the time that we know each other. What unexpected lessons or rewards have come to you from going around your own ladder rather than climbing a traditional one?
That is a good one. And it's easier, I think, it's safer or happier, I guess, to focus on like the rewards. And I'm not sure many of them would be considered unexpected if you're starting your own business, right? So
Yeah.
I had four small kids, so the biggest reward there was flexibility,
Mhm.
right? If you hadn't figured it out by now, or if our listeners hadn't figured it out by now, I did kind of chafe a little bit at sort of the structure and the strictures of a traditional law firm, right? So starting my own business was a lifestyle decision in certain respects.
Yeah.
Flexibility, more time with my kids. I what I really wanted at the beginning was to replace the salary that I was making,
Yep.
right? That's what I needed, and I figured I was going to do it this way. Um, and of course that flexibility is it's even sort of bigger than that in the sense that I've been remote since 2011, so my work is where my laptop is as long as there's a good internet connection. So I've worked from my office here in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, poolside in Palm Beach, the porch of my daughter's apartment in Freetown, Sierra Leone when she was living there. Paris, like places places I
Yeah.
get to go and I get to take my work with me and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the flip side of that are lessons learned, right? My family had to figure out mom's work time versus mom's not work time. I have to figure out, still struggling with
Yes.
non-work time and work time. And the flip side of flexibility, as you know, is so you have to keep going. It's like running your own business it's not as freeing in the sense that sure I can take a vacation and I don't have to ask anyone for the vacation days
Yeah.
except me,
But it's a working vacation.
but it's a working vacation, or I have to manage expectations for clients, or I have to find, overlap or someone to take on, keep the projects rolling. And that's hard for me to do
Yeah.
because I want to make sure that my clients are getting what they need, and I want to be responsive in the way that I've always been. So, and so sometimes that also means like working nights or working weekends,
Mhm.
catching up on my own marketing when, so again, client work comes first, right? So, yeah. And then, as you know, as a business person, some of the lessons that you learn when things go south, right? When a project goes south, or a client's a bad fit, or engagements that are like all but signed on the dotted line, and you have had discovery calls and you're ready to go, and they go in another direction. Sometimes they don't even tell you, and sometimes they do. Um, Team members that end up being problematic. but you didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there's only been like one of those. And you lose client relationships or money. Rejection, you know this, rejection, sleepless nights, worrying about tax flow, not tax flow. Well, taxes too, worrying about taxes. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think all of those are like lessons that I've learned as a business person, which is a different way of thinking,
Yeah.
shift in identity. Um,
I think for
and
me, the biggest lesson that I've learned has been about myself. I've learned so much about myself in this
Mhm.
process, because there's no place to hide when it's your business. You know, if something is going on, if something doesn't feel right, whatever, you know, like no matter where you go, there you are. And so I've any obstacles, internal obstacles that I've had, what that I wasn't aware of, have all come full force into the light, and I've had to work through them. And that to me, that was unexpected, but it's also been um, a very rewarding part of having a business.
When you run your own business, we talked about leadership, right? I started out just working in with law firms, you know, their marketing departments, their lawyers, me, that was it. But as I started building teams, or now that I build teams for specific projects, right? So
Mhm.
I pull people, put the right people in the right seats. There's a level of not only oversight and leadership, but there's a level of building a culture, and that to me is a little bit one of the biggest challenges, I think, because I really didn't think about I really didn't think about that, and I think that that's still a challenge for me because we're all virtual.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and so there's a connection piece that I think that's part of 2025, 2026. Next iteration is figuring out the connection piece between the people that have been with me for a long time, um, because I am not going to want to do this forever. And I want to move more and more, as we've talked about, because you did this, right? More and more into the projects or things that I love, and not being the point person for every
Yeah.
um, client question. So to do that, you have to foster a sense of culture and community. And, that's I think my next lesson to learn with this. Yeah.
Well, then you'll have to come back on and we'll talk all about that.
Make me do it again.
Don't worry, I'll give you a solid year break. How's
Oh,
that?
okay. All
Okay.
right. We talked about this when we were having that chat not that long ago, and you said, well, when I started this, I put you on my wish list, and I went, squeak.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, wait. Do I really want? Okay. Yeah. So
Well, I'm glad that you did come on and that we got to have another wonderful talk because there's no end. I remember long before you and I met, I was just reading your content on LinkedIn and everything you wrote, I found myself like nodding vigorously up and down saying. So
thank
I was already voicing my support and my engagement even before we met. So and I'm so glad now that we've gotten to meet, if not in person, then online to have a number of fantastic conversations. I'm looking forward to more of them.
Yep, absolutely. So much fun to talk to you. So much fun to be here. Put a disclaimer on this. Do not play this podcast at 1.5 speed because nobody will understand it. That's how fast I talk. So, yes, maybe slow it down to 0.75 or
I'm
something.
from New Jersey. You were right. You were fine.
Okay. All right. Makes
I
sense.
grew up in New Jersey in the 80s. That's fast.
That's why we get along
Yep,
because we, yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And please, if you did, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, someone who is on their own unconventional journey. And see you next time. Thanks so
Bye.
much.